Fish and golf with First Blood this morning. And I see Uncle Steve's joined us as well. Excellent. We're off to a good start there. Cameron, good morning. How you holding up there, brother? You staying warm? Because I'm struggling.
Yeah, it's not as bad as it was yesterday. Yesterday was pretty miserable. I was out in it doing the deliveries, and man, every time the wind would blow, like it was very obviously wind. When they're like, "Hey, the wind chill makes it feel like 17." I was like, they are telling the truth.
Yeah, I'll take 25 and no wind over 32 and wind.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, we're not even talking about standing outside. I'm just sitting here in the studio. It gets colder in the studio if it's windy outside than if it's not.
Well, yeah. I mean, we can see your walls. You don't have insulation. So,
correct.
For those of you that don't know, Chris and I are in the state of Georgia, and pretty much the entire Southeast is about to get blasted by an Arctic event. And honestly, once you go south of the Mason-Dixon line, things like snow is just not something we deal with frequently enough for it to be a major concern. So people kind of panic when it happens, and then people get stupid, and it's a whole thing. It's an event. It's it's interesting to watch, and it'll make you think Southerners are stupid all at the same time. Would you say that's a fair assessment, Chris?
Hey, I'm just grateful for the amusing coincidence when the snowpocalypse hit. My wife had drill that weekend, and she was on her way out of town to go to drill that weekend, and I had to buy her a new minivan. That was the snowpocalypse. What was that? 2015?
No, that was February 2014. I know, because I was one of the people that was stranded in the snowpocalypse.
Right. Right. That's right. She was. We did not yet have a Michael on the way. That's right. So that would have been 2014. And here we are 11 years later, and just happens to be drill weekend. So she is out of the state for this one and driving a rental car that I'm not going to have to pay for.
The thing that works out. The thing about that one was, I was so close to your house. You remember that, Chris? You were like, "Kim, it might get dangerous. Come to my house."
Yep.
And my wife at the time was like, "No, go ahead and drive home." And so, because it was my wife and you were not, I decided to go ahead and try and drive home. And that was the incorrect decision to make.
Yep.
Okay. So we could talk about how Georgians panic over 2 inches of snow all day. Like, literally, I know it's difficult to understand, but I promise we could talk about how Georgians panic over 2 inches of snow all day.
Yep.
But there's other stuff. There's actually something that happened at the Jimmy Carter funeral, who is actually a native Georgian from Plains, Georgia. I didn't even want to cover it. I didn't even want to go over it. Look, he was a head of state, and sure, have the big giant funeral and whatever. But something in particular happened yesterday that I really felt like was noteworthy. Garth Brooks came to the funeral and sang "Imagine" by John Lennon. Now, let me just go ahead and be clear and start by offending everybody. I think the Beatles are overrated. I think John Lennon is overrated. Not untalented, but definitely overrated. Like 100% overrated. And John Lennon, just, a weirdo who got thrown into superstardom overnight and was completely unprepared for it and fell down some weird commie bullshit rabbit holes. And Imagine is this song that is just celebrated because it's so beautiful and it's just all these things and it's wonderful, and just, imagine a world of world peace. And look, the song Imagine is trash.
It's a child's fantasy.
It's not just a child's fantasy. It's trash, and it's the type of trash that is really insidious because you don't even understand entirely that it is trash. So look, even though I have the lyrics pulled up, I'm just going to read the first couple because I want to get this exactly correct. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Okay, so let's be clear about what John Lennon was saying there.
Right. This is a 6-year-old girl with a pink unicorn saying, "Wouldn't it be better if Santa didn't have a naughty list at all?" Well, maybe, sweetheart, what you think you mean is, wouldn't it be better if there were no people to go on to, if there was no one to go on to the naughty list? But that line of thinking leads to, wouldn't it be better if there were no people to put on lists?
Right. Well, look, he's not. Basically, what John Lennon's saying right there off the jump is that the concept of heaven is bad. The concept of heaven causes people to do terrible things. And sure, in some cases, but there's currently only one culture whose afterlife beliefs make it violent, and it's not the Christians, it's not the Jews, right? There's only one Abrahamic faith that has a problem with that, but we're not allowed to talk about that either. He didn't say, for example, imagine there's no Mohammed. That's not what he said. What he said was, imagine there's no heaven. When in fact, forever, religion was how people were not just taught ethics across time, but were even taught how to read and write. Like the only book that was in your house was probably the Bible, and that's what you learned to read. Like that. Anyhow, I'm not going to go down all those rabbit holes. We're just going to stay right here with Jimmy Carter and why this is an insult. You can love Jimmy Carter. You can hate Jimmy Carter. There is a lot to criticize. And frankly, there's a lot about the man you could praise. One of the things that the man was a committed Christian to the point to where he had a leadership role in his church for decades post-presidency. Okay? To sing a song that says getting rid of the concept of heaven. And if you go on and listen to the song, it says we should also get rid of the concept of countries. So the guy was a Christian, but screw your heaven. The guy was a president, but screw your borders. Like, this was a slap in the face of the highest order. And even though I'm no fan of Jimmy Carter, it really, really, really bothered me. And I just wanted to mention it. And I just wanted to say that it was trash. Pretend like that song doesn't exist. If you hear it come on the radio, turn the radio off. It is commie atheistic gobbledygook with a pretty little piano riff on top. That's what it is.
Remember, back during the 2020 campaign, there were a bunch of Hollywood starlets that got together, and yes, I realized there were some ostensibly male characters in that video as well, but they were.
No, you said the correct word.
Yes, I have correctly assumed the gender of these men. But you remember the video? I mean, it was super cringe. They got together and sang the song in these bizarre rounds. And yeah, but additionally, speaking of overrated musicians or musicians that are a disappointment, I've often made the argument, we've had this conversation many times before, that there's the art and the artist, and if you cannot separate the art from the artist, then as conservatives, we pretty quickly run out of interesting art to consume. K-Pax is one of the greatest films of all time, but Kevin Spacey is not exactly the guy you want babysitting your children.
No.
I was a huge fan of Garth Brooks when I was a teenager, and holy shit, has he turned out to be a moral disappointment. Right?
Oh, it's all a Me Too shield.
Yeah.
That's what it's a Me Too shield. That's all it is. You can have contempt for him. It's okay.
Yep. Okay. So I've got a couple of stories that I want to cover. Before we get into DGUs, Cameron, I'm going to let you pick, the order. We're going to talk about the Guardian Angels in New York City, looting after the wildfires, or gun laws in Washington State.
Start with Washington State.
Okay, so Washington gun store shop owner faces BS charges from state. This comes from thetruthaboutguns.com. Gators Custom Guns in Kelso, Washington. And I tell you what, if I might just have to remember this one and go check them out and say hello the next time the wife and I go up to visit my in-laws who are in Spokane. Our national right to keep and bear arms is not a second-class civil right subject to local rules, opinions, or interpretations. That statement right there is paraphrasing of comments made recently by Clarence Thomas about the Second Amendment in relation to a case that was just brought relative to the Bruin case. And yeah, he pointed out, he basically said that the existence of gun laws generally attempts to relegate the Second Amendment to a second class right. And it's not. There is a very good argument that the Second Amendment is the more important between the First and the Second. And there's definitely a reason that the First and the Second Amendment are the first and the second, and not the 9th and 10th, right? You get further down the Bill of Rights and you get into amendments like the right to a trial by jury, the protection against cruel and unusual punishment, etc. And all of those stem from the right to speak and the right to defend yourself with arms equal to what is available to your enemy, which in the case of arguing about civil liberties is the government, right? I've talked a little bit before about the process of going through getting VA benefits as a disabled veteran, and how a thing that veterans need to understand before they engage in that process is that you're engaged in an adversarial process here. What you're doing when you file a VA claim is you are suing the government. What I want you to understand is that mindset belongs in tandem with your understanding of the Constitution. What the founders understood when they crafted the entirety of the Constitution, up to and including the Bill of Rights, and keep in mind, when I say this, I am excluding from this mentality the 11th Amendment and beyond, right? Up to and including the 10th Amendment, the understanding of the founders is that the government is inherently corrupt and prone to corruption and is the adversary of a free people. And the existence of the document is to create an adversarial system whereby the people are empowered to chain that monster. We have a magic milk cow that never ceases to produce life-sustaining milk, but will eat you if you get in front of it. And so we keep it chained so that it can't move around and devour the children. That is what the Constitution is. It is taking the necessary evil and putting it in a cage so that it cannot do the harm that it does, and we can attempt to extract from it the value that it produces. So in this story, what we've got is the state's complaint is, according to the state's complaint in March 2022, Washington passed SB 5078, which banned the sale, importation, distribution, and manufacture of large capacity magazines, which can accept more than 10 rounds of ammunition. Okay.
You mean standard capacity magazine?
That's what I was about to say. Correct. A standard capacity magazine is the magazine that is designed to go with the firearm at its inception.
Yeah, and it could be for a pistol or a rifle. It doesn't matter.
Correct.
Right. If your Beretta 9mm is going to hold a slightly different ammo count than your 1911, because that's just how they were built.
Right. Yeah, and your AR-15s, your AR style rifles, the magazine is a 30-round magazine.
Well, I mean, obviously, they can't ban the gun, but they can supposedly fuck with the ammunition and then sort of backdoor ban the gun. Honestly, if you ever want to know how the government works, just look at the ACA, because the ACA, you couldn't have single payer, you couldn't outlaw private insurance, but you could pass all these laws that would force everybody to act in such a way as to where there was a single payer system, right, and where you could outlaw certain insurance practices. But hey, we didn't create a single payer system.
Make it awful.
Yeah, and that's exactly what that's the exact same mentality behind anytime you've got one of these, large capacity magazine. No, screw you. It's standard capacity magazine. It's not a large capacity
we're
magazine.
Making an argument for women's health care. No, you're arguing for abortion. Don't lie when you open your mouth.
Yeah, besides, did you just assume my gender?
It's bodily
autonomy. How do you know I don't need an abortion?
No, it's infanticide. You're not a feminist. You're a eugenicist. Right? But what about the children in mass shootings? No. It is not a law-abiding citizen that murders children with firearms or commits mass shootings. Your solution to there is evil in the world is, I want to neuter what is good.
Waller points out that the Kel-Tec PMR 30 is designed to have a 30-round mag. It's right in the name.
Damn right.
Yeah. And really, why do you need 30 rounds? Well, I don't know. Why do you need a condom?
Mass casualty?
I mean, that would have been a lot funnier if you'd have picked up the joke sooner. I tried, ladies and gentlemen.
You're correct. Condoms are mass casualty devices. A condom is a weapon of mass destruction. So, anyway.
We're never going to get through that. All right, Chris, let's get through this. The state
argues the threat posed by LCMs is not merely theoretical. Since 1980, these stats are just amazing. Since 1980, LCMs have been involved in at least 85 mass shootings nationwide, resulting in 791 fatalities. 790, less than 800 fatalities involved in mass shootings in the last 45 years almost. That's practically safe, right? You have more fatalities from accidental self-inflicted kitchen knife wounds. So Wentz has the owner of the gun store has countersued in Superior Court with the help of the Silent Majority Foundation, a unique law firm which is located in Pasco, Washington. Wentz won his case, but within minutes, the state appealed and got a stay. Now, in 1 week, the two sides will battle it out again in Washington State Supreme Court. If he loses, Wentz said he will go to the United States Supreme Court. So we're going to be watching for this. We're going to be watching for this to hit the Supreme Court and see how this goes. And frankly, with Amy Coney Barrett on the court, who knows? Because Jesus, and this is probably what we're going to do the show on Monday, unless you want me to hold off until Tuesday. But you know that ACB just voted she just entered her opinion on the Supreme Court case to say, no, Trump needs to go and be sentenced.
Yeah. I don't entirely
that's a whole rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I don't even entirely know what I think about that yet, because I could construct an argument that that's terrible. I could construct an argument that that's actually a pretty wise thing for her to do. So I'm not even gonna just leave that one alone.
Well, part of the conversation when we get to this on Monday or Tuesday, when she was being considered for confirmation, I pointed out at the time I had a problem with her and I had a problem with Kavanaugh. I didn't think the way the media and the Democrats treated either of them was very good, but they're both diversity hires, and that aggravated me. And we've seen the result of putting these two diversity hires on the Supreme Court more than once. So let's move on to the next story. We're going to go ahead with the Guardian Angels. So this, we talked about the Daniel Penny case. We talked a little bit about that poor woman that was set on fire by some random hostile foreign invader. I don't think we've had a chance to cover, and we probably won't. It's probably mentioned in the article, but I don't think we've talked about the guy that was just randomly shoved under the train. Are you tracking on that one, Cameron?
No.
Last week, some flipping teenager runs up behind this dude in the New York subway, and it's like as the train is coming into the station, runs up and shoves this guy on the track in front of the train. Just no apparent motive, no apparent inciting event, anything. The kid's in custody for shoving the guy in front of the train. And notice I've said shoving the guy in front of the train. I have not said that he's been charged with murder. Because that poor son of a bitch that got run over by a subway train is not dead.
Yikes.
But that's the kind of stuff that's happening in the New York subway. And a couple times over the last few years, Hochul, while just on and on, they keep saying, well, murder's down, crime's down, violent crime's down. Why have you had to deploy the National Guard in the New York subway? So there's this organization called the Guardian Angels. These guys wear red jackets and red berets, and apparently they've been around since the 70s, but they've been pretty dormant for quite a while. But inside the Guardian Angels' new mission to take back subways as New Yorkers are ready to fight back against transit chaos. And I'll remind you, being this is Firearms Friday, and this is why the story has some relevance to our general topic. Among the problems that caused the New York subway to be dramatically unsafe is that the people, the citizens, the law-abiding taxpayers who fund the subway have been disarmed by their state. And brief aside, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole too far, but I want to connect this real quick to make the point. You've got New York State being one of the most onerous states for gun restrictions. The obvious hoax, the obvious sham that is the weaponization of their judicial system, of their courts against Donald Trump, where the state itself has been directly involved in election interference for the last year and a half, 2 years, right? In a state that is also a sanctuary state in active defiance of the United States sovereignty and national security. New York State, and most especially New York City, are completely unhinged rogue governments. We've kind of joked about it before. What's the external version of a secession where, it's not that the state decides they don't want to be part of the U.S. anymore, and so they secede, but rather we decide we're tired of your bullshit and you're out. We need a word for that. Something like ejection. And yeah, New York and California should both be ejected from the United States because they are hostile rogue actors. They are acting in absolute contravention of the United States of America and the U.S. Constitution. One more real quick aside. Good morning, boys.
Good morning, gentlemen.
They just got in from the snow.
Yes.
So
John Carpenter made a pair of movies starring Kurt Russell called Escape from New York and Escape from LA.
Yep.
You know, sometimes like I understand why the people who feel like we live in a simulation feel like we live in a simulation sometimes. I really do. I don't agree with it, but I understand why they think what they think.
Tim Pool did a show probably 2 months ago, where he had a theological expert, and an AI expert on to debate creationism versus simulation theory. And honestly, you should go watch that, and we should do a show and just talk about what those guys were talking about on their show. It was fascinating.
I wish you still had the badges, because Unverified Bear would have just won it. He says, when we eject a territory, we call it abortion. Take back the word.
Hey, you want your women's bodily autonomy? We'll abort your state government.
And it's not the state government. It's always the city. Never forget. It's the blue cancer.
Right. There are no blue states, only red states with blue cancers.
That's right.
So the Guardian Angels, New York on Monday embraced the Guardian Angels and founder Curtis Sliwa as the anti-crime crusaders resumed patrols of the troubled city subway system for the first time since 2020. One grateful New Yorker even planted a kiss on Sliwa as the red beret-wearing crew poked around the darkest corners of Bronx and Manhattan stations looking for trouble, with the Post tagging along. And I don't really like the use of the word "looking for trouble" here. They're looking for people who are making trouble, and we
knew what they meant.
Yeah, they're not out trying to start trouble. Guardian Angels founder Curtis Sliwa says it's time for the group to resume subway patrols for the first time since 1980. It's good to see y'all back, Bronx resident Tammy Benson, 60, told Sliwa after giving him a kiss at the 125th Street station in Harlem. You and them need to come back. I'm grateful to see it. I feel really blessed when I see them. It's been like 40 years, and he's really sweet and kind. You need to come back. So these guys are patrolling the subway, and they're not an armed force. They're not an armed force. They wear the red so that they're clearly visible, and they go out of their way. You know, like here, you see them taking video of this kid doing whatever it is. So the Post tagged along with new patrols, handing out water to the homeless and all that kind of stuff. This is citizen engagement in a very good and real way, in my opinion. And frankly, I'd be much, much happier if the Guardian Angels were armed. I'm not saying I want to see them out doing vigilante shit. I'm saying I want them to be safe. I want them to have the constitutionally guaranteed right to keep and bear arms at all times for any reason without restriction.
Well, if they're going to have basic first aid, excuse me, I don't know what's wrong with me this morning. If they're going to have if they're going to have basic first aid, if they're going to have food and water, having some way to defend themselves sort of rolls right into that package. And the fact that they don't have it, and I think it's a good thing. We've talked before about how Kyle Rittenhouse did nothing wrong, and I will defend that point to the day I die. There should be more Kyle Rittenhouses and, frankly, Daniel Penny's in the world, not less. It's just every time we have one, we scrutinize Kyle Rittenhouse and Daniel Penny instead of the system that made such a thing necessary. But yeah, I agree. They should be armed. There should be more citizen engagement. This is how it's supposed to work. Like, You're not supposed to solve your problems in Washington. You're supposed to solve your problems in your local neighborhood God, I just blanked on the name of it, but whatever that meeting is called, that's where you're supposed to. That's where you're supposed
City
to solve
council
your problem.
meeting,
Your what?
your city council meetings, your town hall meetings.
No, I was going even smaller, like your literal local neighborhood. But it doesn't matter. Point. Yeah, fine, sure.
Yeah, board of commissioners, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, fine. Your local town hall meeting, same thing. Yeah, and Pitt Danny said just a small sidearm. Yeah, exactly. Nothing crazy.
Yeah. I'm not talking about him walking. I'm not even talking about him walking around with an AR, which I mean I'd be totally comfortable with. But for God's sake, you're patrolling the New York subways, y'all. They've had 10 murders on the subway this year. Today's the 10th.
And of course, because you're going to trap a bunch of people underground, so they've got no escape, and they're unarmed. Like it's fish in a barrel. Of course, it's a high crime area because everybody in New York uses that system because they kind of have to, and then while they're in that system, they're weak. So, like
and we live in a world, okay. I mentioned there were a couple of cases on the New York subway just in the last week. The woman was just lit on fire by a hostile foreign invader. And then there was the guy that was just shoved in front of the train by some random teenager. That kind of nonsense is going on. 573 felony assaults on the subway last year and the year before. 10 homicides already this year, apparently. The Daniel Penny situation, that didn't begin with Daniel Penny deciding to murder somebody. That began with somebody saying he was going to murder everybody, and Daniel Penny stepped in and did something about it. And this is in a world where we're seeing that happen. As the forest fires are raging in California, as those wildfires are going on, we're seeing video now of homeless people setting the fires. And I saw one video earlier. This guy's driving a pickup truck down the street while somebody's throwing gasoline out the sides of the pickup truck, like jugs of gas out the sides of the pickup truck to try and exacerbate and spread the fire further. Like that's something that's going to get a lot more attention in the coming weeks and days. Is even if the fires started naturally somehow, even if they weren't just straight up arson, there are arsonists out there actively spreading the fires. And, this is in a world, go back to 2020 and we covered this where we talked about the World of Warcraft, the weird pandemic glitch that happened in World of Warcraft, which has been studied by pandemiologists, because until 2020, we never had an actual pandemic at the same time that we had the academic field of pandemiology. And so the entire study was essentially based on models like the bizarre thing that happened in World of Warcraft, where there was a curse that a person would catch fighting a certain boss. And the glitch was that when they weren't supposed to take the curse with them when they left the boss fight, but they did. And then what we saw was people who had the curse and went back out into the game world would intentionally spread the curse to other people to weaponize it as carriers. And then, we talked about that a bit, and there were news stories about how our pandemiologists are now saying that this model isn't reliable because that's just not how people act. People don't do things like that. And then almost immediately we started getting the articles of people going in and spitting on their hand and rubbing the spit all over every button in an elevator, licking doorknobs, going into grocery stores, licking a pint of ice cream and putting the lid back on and sticking it back on the shelf. And turns out, oh no, people are exactly that terrible.
Some people. Okay. I'm trying to be out by 8:30. Can we get to the
Yeah, let's move on to the next
Rooftop Koreans Part 2? That's what I'm thinking of this as. Even if that's not entirely accurate.
Fire elemental Koreans? Because these roofs are on fire. So
yeah, I was about to say, you don't actually want to be on the rooftop in a situation like this.
So looting is on the rise during catastrophic Los Angeles fires. I got to say, in fairness, we're talking about California. So we're not talking about, going into the Target and stealing 1,000 pairs of socks that you could push out the door in a grocery cart. Southern California is grappling with raging wildfires that have forced over 130,000 residents to evacuate, with at least 5 lives lost. As firefighters combat the flames, local authorities are addressing another threat: looters targeting evacuated homes and vulnerable communities. Now, they say vulnerable communities. Y'all, there are a lot of multi-million-dollar mansions that just burned to the ground. Gold is molecularly indestructible. Those ashes are going to be worth sifting through. Now, I ain't fucking with it. But there are going to be people out there sifting through the ashes and finding what used to be high-end, high-value jewelry that has melted down, and the result is a puddle of gold with some loose diamonds in it. That's a thing that somebody out there right now is about to take himself off the, well, probably not going to take himself off the street that way, because not having money is not how he became homeless. Please believe. But yeah, there's going to be some shit there. So Los Angeles District Attorney Nathan Hochman issued a strong warning Wednesday, emphasizing a zero-tolerance approach to looting, theft, and fraud. This coming out of the state that decriminalized shoplifting up to $1,000. I mean, you've literally spent the last decade cultivating professional looters. You sounded the all clear for them a decade ago to say, hey, y'all don't even need to wait for a natural disaster to do your looting. Just keep it in one buggy.
Yeah, I don't. I'm being very careful on how I comment on everything with regard to the California situation, because A, it's not over yet, and B, and
yeah,
just, another
massive wildfire broke out
right,
yesterday.
And you were kind enough to mention this on the show yesterday, that I'm currently of the opinion that criticizing Californians at this point in time is not appropriate. I understand the people that say, look, there are a certain amount of people in California that voted for things like this. And yeah, look, I hear all that. But at this point in time, if somebody has a heart attack and they're overweight, they know that they had a heart attack because they're overweight.
I feel personally attacked.
But maybe drive them to the hospital and make sure they're not going to die before you criticize their lifestyle choices. And that's the phase of this process I think we're in with California. So now, on the other hand,
I would like to agree with you on those points, but let me point out two things. As a matter of tactical prudence, while the headlines are grabbing attention, it's precisely the time to make the headlines. Going back and discussing this in retrospect in a month or 2 months or 6 months, it won't be sufficiently present in the public consciousness for the criticism to have a significant effect. And then the other point, yes, there are some people in these communities that voted against these policies, but let's be clear. We're talking about Los Angeles. We're talking about Los Angeles, California. We're not talking about California generally. I mean, that too. But in Los Angeles in particular, where you've got the DEI fire chief that put out the diversity video where the big black lesbian says, well, if you're a man that's just so big I can't carry you, that's your fault for being in the fire. What? Listen, there's one qualification to be a fireman. Can you carry the fucking load? It's the same qualification for being a soldier. At the end of the day, can you carry the load? Now, there's an additional qualification that's required for a soldier to be a specialized soldier like what I was. But, buddy, I can tote a 300-pound man. I've seen me did it. And I've seen 150-pound man tote my big ass. And in full battle rattle, I start scaring 400 pounds real quick when I'm covered in ammo and radios and shit. It takes a strong man to do the job. And the fact of the matter is that in Los Angeles, you're talking 80 to 85% voting in support of the psychotic policies that led them to not to this disaster happening, but to this disaster expanding at the rate that it has.
Yeah. Look. You wear a seatbelt because you might be in a car crash. You don't wear a seatbelt to prevent getting into car crashes. And I recognize that you can make the argument that not only did Californians not wear seatbelts, they outlawed wearing seatbelts and said that you were a racist, bigot, homophobe if you insisted that seatbelts were a good idea. Look, I'm clear on all that. I just, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm in the minority. I accept that. But I think that there is more utility, short and long term, in solving the problem. Letting maybe a different federal government be in place by the time all the fires are put out anyway. Like, brother, you make a lot of friends this way. Like, a whole lot more flies with honey than you do vinegar. And this is going to be an opportunity. So I'm just, but look, as far as
I made the criticism yesterday when I was talking about it that we're going to see, they're going to get their shit paid for. And Alex in the comments said something about, well, the people aren't going to see any money. Biden came out yesterday and said, we are going to pay for 100% of the cost of this damage. I'm like, yo, I got trees down too, yo. And I don't even need them to come out and do it. Just buy me a tractor. We'll call it a day. Right. But the analogy you just made with the seatbelt, you said, and then they outlawed the seatbelts. I'm going to take it a step further. We've had conversations before about victim blaming. Girl goes down the dark alley. She's inebriated and wearing skimpy clothing, and the bad thing happens to her, and we say you shouldn't do that. And then, of course, the people that vote to turn all the water off say, "Oh, she's not the victim. She's the victim here. She didn't do anything wrong because she's the victim." No, she did do something wrong. Now, that doesn't mean that we condemn her for doing it wrong, for doing the wrong thing, but it does mean that we look at it and we say, maybe you don't stick the fork in the outlet again. Well, and what California has done is they have forced her at gunpoint to wear a T-shirt that says rape bait and roofie herself in that dark alley.
Well, the reason why we talk about the behavior of the victim is so that there's not more victims. It's not to blame and shame the victim. It's so that when the young woman goes to the frat house alone and gets blackout drunk, we tell all the other young women, don't go to the frat house alone and get blackout drunk. It's not that we say the first girl was bad. It's just we're trying to prevent more bad things from happening. But look, the looters.
Yeah, the fox in the hen house is very different from a hen in the fox house.
Ew. No. Okay. You have made your point, sir. But look, the looters. I'm okay in any martial law situation, and let's be honest, like this is a martial law situation. I'm okay with looters being shot in a martial law situation.
Oh, yeah.
just know, like, if there's right, look, your neighbors, your neighbors have been ruined. Like, have you heard the audio of James Woods trying not to cry as he talks about losing everything?
Yes.
And he like went back to like rescue an elderly neighbor while everything was burning around him. And like, okay, so you've got that level of heroism on the one hand, and then what you've decided you're going to do is you're just going to be an absolute piece of shit, and you're going to pick over the corpse of the old world and pull the gold out of its teeth. Nah, sorry. I have zero sympathy for you if you take 2 to the chest and 1 to the dome. Okay, yeah, fine. One less thing fucking up my gene pool.
My dad and I have joked often that I wear a multi-tool with a pair of pliers in it. Just always when I'm dressed, I've got my multi-tool on me in case I find myself having to just a little bit of work. And I've even jokingly told my kids this. Oh, I've got that just in case Granddad hits the ground. I'm getting his teeth before I call 911.
Yeah, we need more rooftop Koreans. Okay, all right. Look,
I even love the Korean word for rooftop Korean is jibunghanguk. I even love the words. So I know you want to hard out in 13 minutes, so I got a video.
Let's get at least one DGU in. Yes, okay, let's do it.
If you take a look, we want to keep our eye on the person who's sitting down, the guy with that red shirt. Now,
so we got us a thuglet with his pants around his pants down, like he's not even hiding his shame. Sideways hat, and he's holding the gun like he just picked it up out of the box.
This armed guy here is going to get everybody into this establishment, and we're going to watch everybody walk in, and then we're going to see the guy in the red, who apparently is an off-duty police officer, come back with a gun, fire shots, and take this guy down. And then he tries to fire some shots at the accomplice that takes off on the motorcycle. Now, this guy, he had compliance at first, and he looked like he was going to do everything that bad guy was saying. But turns out, he made a good move there, and he ended up saving everybody from that guy armed with a gun. And now we're just going to,
So, oh dear.
Yeah, that's why.
We might ought to change the name of the show from Firearms Friday to FAFO Friday, because that right there, that was the scientific process on full display.
Yeah, don't look. I've said it before. Like, don't try and rob pawn shops, and the old man behind the counter on the pawn shop will not pull out a 12 gauge loaded with birdshot and make you look like a plate of spilled SpaghettiOs. Like,
I'm tired of going to liquor stores and old Clovines hiding out behind the counter with a shotgun. So, I hate to admit it, I was expecting to have a little more commentary to go with that one in particular, but that was a good example of the tactical mindset that needs to accompany your lawful armed self-defense, right?
Oh yeah, that cop didn't. That cop didn't announce. He said, "Oh, okay, you want me to walk inside? Okay, right. I'll walk inside." And the second you look away, I'm dropping you.
He carefully,
and that's exactly what happened.
And took advantage of that key moment, of that key opportunity. And the tactical situation is an incredibly fluid thing, right? When you see the shit going down, like you're in a bank, you're armed, and the bad guys come in and start telling everybody to get down on the ground. Rule number 1 of gunfighting: you cannot outdraw somebody who's got the drop on you. You can't outdraw somebody after they've already drawn their weapon. You cannot outdraw somebody who's already got the drop on you. What you can do is you can take the tactical advantage as soon as you see that opportunity and dive behind cover and then produce your weapon and begin to engage the enemy, for example. And that's not a hard and fast rule. Like I said, the tactical situation in any conflict is an incredibly fluid thing. And so you need to train not just your marksmanship, not just the speed of your draw, not just the speed of your transition drills. You need to be paying. Get out there and play Kate's game sometime. You know what? That'd be a great video, Cameron. We should get you guys out to the house and we play a round of Kate's game and kind of show what that is. That's for training situational awareness. To make you the Sean Spencer of gunfighters, for example. Unverified Bear says, wait your turn. Yeah. But that tactical situation, the fluidity of the tactical situation is something that you cannot prepare yourself perfectly for. You can prepare yourself carefully for.
Right.
So, all right, it is 8:22, and I know you need to get off the horn, Cameron. So it's Friday and it's cold. Snowmageddon, ice apocalypse. It's wintertime in Georgia for sure. It is, let me see. Looks like it's 32 degrees outside right here, and the high today is 38. I don't know about y'all, but there's hot cocoa and fireplaces in my future today.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Giant marshmallows.
Let me take a peek out the door. Let me see, because the app says it's snowing, but let's look. Yeah, I've got a little bit of accumulation. There's not enough out there yet to roll up a snowball and throw it, and I don't expect there to be, but there's definitely enough snow out there that the maintenance I was planning on doing on my truck today is going to be postponed until tomorrow or Monday.
Yeah.
So there's your safety brief. Don't get out there. Don't get out there on the road unless you absolutely have to, because believe it or not, I don't care how good your car is. I don't care how good your how well you are acclimatized to driving in the snow. I guarantee not everybody around you on the road is. I was telling Cameron earlier, a few years ago, I was driving through Stockbridge on my way to Clayton State University, and there was a hill on the way there, and a pretty steep hill and a long steep hill, and I was all right because I'm smart enough to pull my pick-em-up truck over onto the side of the road and drive up there. But there were a lot of shiny, pretty cars that were just sliding backwards down the road, bumping into each other, just trying to, thinking they could just put the gas down and spin the tires faster than the car slid backwards. Oh, and they made a big old mess, and I drove right around them because no. Yeah. My wife says, so I missed the snow weekend. This is bananas. We checked the weather yesterday, and she is significantly further north than we are right now, and there's no snow, apparently. I found that amusing. So, but that's your safety brief. Don't drive in the snow.
Yep. Good enough for me.
Y'all be safe out there. Thanks for watching today. We love you, and we will see you on Monday.
Monday.